about the first steps in launching a product, and we will definitely get there. But before we do, I think it's really important that we all take a moment to really recognize the collective trauma that we're all experiencing in the world right now, and certainly in this country. And I'm currently in New York City. I'm in New York. There's a lot of pain that everyone's going through, and while we're all doing our best to take care of ourselves and our loved ones and show empathy for each other, sometimes it can be hard to be, trying to work on your business or trying to keep up spirits and fighting forward to be an entrepreneur, to try something new. It can certainly be discouraging. And then to turn on the news or to be personally affected or to even be out on the streets and protesting, whatever it is your approach is to what's happening, it affects everyone. It affects your mentality, it affects your life, and it's not easy. So today we are going to talk about how to think about launching a product, which I think is an important conversation and something that most people rush in that process as opposed to taking their time to do it. And as we do so, I just want to acknowledge the pain and the collective suffering that we are all experiencing. And however you experience it at home, please know that there's a lot of love, collective empathy, and support for everyone. Okay. With that in mind, let's kind of open up the conversation to the notion of launching and kind of the steps towards launching. Please, if you guys have questions, if things come up, while I normally have kind of a focused topic, if you will, this time is ultimately your time. It can be a struggle to start a business, and through the lens of how we start businesses and who gets to start a business, overwhelmingly, it is very challenging for minorities or women, people of color, to start businesses and to launch products. And it's through not just that lens, but also the lens of the collective struggle of moving through and trying to actualize something, right? Hard to be an entrepreneur when you have other things that are possibly working against you, not working for you. I have to say that I'm grateful for a lot of the small business associations and lists, collective community groups, areas of support that not only help us when it comes to educating on entrepreneurship, but do so through the lens of supporting underserved voices and people who need access to those resources. Okay, on to the topic at hand of the first steps in launching a product. So guys, normally when we think about launching a product, many entrepreneurs will get very excited and say, I have an idea, and I just want to go and build it. I just want to go and create this product. The thing that they fail to think about is that it's not just about getting a product into the world. It's very different when you go from, I want to try to build or create this scarf, to the position of, oh, I actually want to create a business. And so when you're thinking about a product, it's not just the notion of, I want to create tops or I want to create dresses, right? It goes beyond that. The product becomes the fundamental ground by which you build a business off of. And when you ask yourself about the importance of the product, right? What is in the product? Why do we need to spend so much time on it? It's because if you don't get the product right, you're likely also not getting your customer right. And there are a host of all these other components that open up without being thoughtful and systematic about your approach. So when it comes to launching the product, the few things that I always tell people they have to do is they absolutely need to think about the long tail game of the business that they're launching. Guys, if you're a hobbyist, if you're like, just want to play, amazing. I should probably play more. I should probably be creating things just for the fun of it. And there's nothing wrong with being, someone who wants to play. I think it's actually very fun. But if you want to launch this product, and in my mind, I'm really equating this product to a brand, and I'm equating this brand to a business. So if your goal here is to launch this business, then you have to have a good understanding of, number one, what on earth is the end game here? Meaning, do you want to have a small, medium-sized business that you're going to run for the next 10 years? Do you actually want to have maybe an innovation-driven business? So maybe it's more like the Stitch Fixes of the world, where you're looking to create a piece of technology or software that's going to drive fashion in a very interesting way. Or maybe you're looking to create a small fashion brand. Or maybe you want to create a global fashion brand, right? Again, different ways of looking at an end game. None is more or less important or better. However, each one is very unique to you. So as you take a step back and think about launching a product, you also want to ask yourself, what kind of business am I most suited to be running? And am I actually the right person to be launching a business? Am I better off finding a co-founder and being the head of, product development and design? Or maybe I want to be the business person and I need to find someone who has a great product or has a great eye for design. A lot of the times, guys, we need to be finding our counterparts. It's very rare. It's very, very rare to find someone who is both the head designer and can design and manage that creative direction amazing, and then at the same time that they're also like the best at business. Like, I don't know these people. Very, very hard to find. And by the way, I can't draw. So when it comes to the part of the business that I'm best at, it's really the part of the business that's like the business orientation, right? The marketing, the sales, the strategy, like that's where I excel. And so when you're launching a product and you're launching your brand, it's important to know, number one, what are your core competencies? And like, what do you actually want to be doing? How long do you want to do this for, right? What's the end result, the end game? Do you have the financial resources to go for it, but you actually need some guidance and support? Or are you going to be struggling your way through it, right? If you want to get that hands-on experience of being involved in the design development process, can you get a job somewhere where you can do that, where you're not spending what little resources you have to try to launch a brand that may not get the traction that it needs in order for it to actually give you the income you want within that time period? So when I hear companies or entrepreneurs and small business owners and people who are in that very nascent stage say, well, I've saved $10,000 and I want to launch my brand. And I'll say, well, what is it you want to get out of this? I want to be a designer. Great. Well, can you get that skill set and gain those skills and develop that and hone that while someone's paying you, rather than investing what you have into something that honestly is not as much capital as you would need in order to really like get it off the ground, right? In a business way, not in a hobby way. I don't want to like knock down hobbyists and people who just want to play. But it's very important to know where your business orientation is and what you want to get out of it. Sometimes I tell people that when they get on the phone with me for the first time and they're thinking about launching a company, my job is to discourage them. It's to say, do you really want to do this? Is this really like why do you want to do this? Like, what on earth creates this environment that you think you want to do this? And I think it's important to ask yourself that question and make sure that this is something that you feel really compelled to. So, okay, let's go back to some more like procedural kind of steps, right? How do you actually unpack this? What does it look like? Let's say you're that person who's telling me, Syama, I really, really want to do this. I have the capital to do it. I think I have the taste or I have the business sensibility, and I'm actually going to outsource the other side of that, right? If I have the money and I have the creative side, I'm going to hire the business person, right? Maybe you're hiring me. I don't know. I'm going to hire the business person. Or you might be saying, I have the money and I have the business sensibility and I want to hire a creative person who's going to design and develop and help me create that. So the very first step is like, where are you in this process? What kind of a business owner are you? Right? And can you actually like outsource and be able to let go of the control to be able to do what's best for your business? So that's the other thing. When you're thinking about the first steps in launching your product in the first year before you've even done anything, you're probably so used to doing everything on your own. You're used to being, the person that lives and dies by your brand. The moment you bring in assistance, support, you hire people, all of a sudden you have less control. So are you actually oriented and suited to let go of some of that control, right? Is that something that you can actually do? Now, when we stop and step back from there, or actually move forward from there, we have your budget, we have your core competencies, and then we also have, what is the idea of this product? The next step in that is really developing and doing customer market research on what are the brand DNA components of that brand. And that's a really cool service that my agency does for a lot of companies. And what I love about that is it's really this opportunity for you to take a step back and say, well, how am I optimally positioning this business so that I can actually capture the right market share with the right dollars, with the right resources? And how do I actually build this brand that's something that's bigger than me, right? How do I really make an impact? What's going to stick in the world? And that brand DNA is very, very important. So you do it yourself. You hire an agency to do it. I got to tell you, you do it yourself. It's a little bit harder because sometimes when we do things for ourselves, we actually get this notion that like we need to prove ourselves. So we look at it through this pre-built lens of like, well, I want this to be my customer. I want this to be the right thing in the market. So I'm just going to put it down on paper and just say that that's the case. Maybe you're right. I don't know. Preferred to have some research, preferred to have some analysis behind that, preferred to like actually know that that's the case. But trust me, lots of people do it without having any of that information. And what I think is so interesting about that is, after you have your brand DNA, it actually kind of sets the playing field and the vision for the business. And the vision, I think, is really important. And that to me is very powerful, right? To have that vision. And then from there, you probably then go back to the drawing board of product, right? As opposed to saying like, I'm so hell-bent on creating this product that I'm actually just going to create the product and then figure out the market and then figure out the costing and then figure that out. You actually go into it saying, I'm in love and I'm obsessed with my customer. And I'm finding ways to develop and design products for my customer. And that, I think, is a much easier position to be in. Because if you are a namesake brand, so your brand is your own name. So let's say, for example, the Alexander McQueens of the world, right? When he first launched, it was like not a mass market appeal brand, right? Very niche, very specific, not really designed for a customer base, designed for his muses, right? Designed more out of this artistic vision. Took a while for it to catch on storm and for the rest of the world to adapt it in a mass market way. All of us, fashion aficionados, were excited by him early on. However, right, when it comes to that mass market, consumer market share, making money, revenue driving, took a while, right? So when you're asking yourself, am I in love with the product or am I in love with the customer or some combination of that? In this early stage in the brand DNA, that's really where you get a chance to figure it out. And I would suggest spending a lot of time understanding your customer. The next thing I would do is, and this is where a lot of product developers and myself, we kind of get into this like back and forth type of thing. It's like, how do you set your price? How do you know what you're developing into, right? Am I developing a $50 top? And I'm going to tell my product people like, all right, $50 top, let's back into that price point. But what if the client, what if you actually want something that is a much higher, like a much nicer fabric? What if the fabric at that cost of goods, isn't what you want and you actually want something that's going to be a lot nicer? And what's interesting about that is that's the part where you grow a lot in your beginning stages of launching a brand. All of a sudden you realize that like having the best of the best of the best comes at a very high price tag. And when you go after customer, market, product, positioning, you're going to have to find a way to make it all work together, right? How are you going to create something that's very innovative, design driven, whatever your checklist is, at the right price point? And how do you get those cost of goods? So sometimes production will say, well, you give me your target, I'll work backwards. And sometimes I'll tell the client, like, okay, client, like you tell me what fabrics you are most inclined to, and how do we kind of build the market around something that's actually very mutual. It's hard when you're running a business in the beginning stages because it's also very personal to you, right? It's like you catch up your identity into all of it. It becomes a badge of honor, right? Or martyrdom, however you take a look at it. But launching that product and being so attached to it can also have its fundamental flaws. And part of that is not being objective. Part of that is, not being able to steer the ship because you're also learning quickly as you are applying that knowledge. So let's kind of recap. I know we've gone to a lot of different directions here. Number one, super duper important to make sure that, as you are, planning out your business, you ask yourself, am I driven towards, I'm oriented to the customer or to my product? Also, very important to understand, what roles do I want to play in my business? What's the end game of my business? How do I actually want to see this business succeed? Next, it's important to understand, is this a hobby or is this actually a business? Maybe you got to do this in a different order, but you guys catch my drift. Is it a business? Is it a hobby? And then it becomes where do I need the support, and then how do you kind of build the brand? Then the cost of goods component, right? What are my sacrifices and what are my non-negotiables? That's very important. It's never going to be to build the cheapest product, right? You don't want to sacrifice labor. I think we all here have ethics around labor and making sure that, people are not being exploited, that people are being honored for artisanship and all of those things. So very important to understand, what are your non-negotiables, right? What are the things that are very important to you as a business? And then from there, you start to actually build the framework of this business. And then you take all of that information, right? And you put that into the conversation with your product development people. You take your budget, which is going to help you understand what you spend on marketing and what you're going to spend on sales activations and product. You take your product budget. That's going to actually help you inform what your projections are going to be on your sell-through. Your product budget's also going to really, it's really going to inform your product development, your cost of goods, all of those things. So that's kind of the series of steps I would take. Yay, we have a question. Thank you for asking a question. Okay, so this question is, what would you say is the most important type of research you should be doing before you launch? And what are some of the key indicators you should look for to know if your product will do well? You need to do testing. So research, obviously look at your competitors. You want to be doing deep dives into customer personas. You may actually want to be looking at having some early customer focus groups or conversations. So we do a lot of early on customer testing through phone calls. And really figuring out what are the key core competencies and what are the things that customer is looking for. So you need to research both online and then also on the phone. You need to talk to people. You don't know if your product is going to do well. Very few people do know 100% if the product is going to do well. But what you are looking for is to fill a need in the market, meaning it can be an emotional need, it's a financial need, but there is a need. And what I always tell people is that while there might be oversaturated product categories, there are lots of undersaturated voices. And what you should be looking for is really tapping into those markets and those underserved voices that you can actually find a really nice niche for yourself. As far as a patent and a copyright. So patents, so if you actually are developing something with innovation in it and it's something that can go to scale and you can develop a patent and you can actually license that and other people will want your patent, or want to use that, or you think there's something proprietary, then I would say talk to a patent lawyer, because I'm not a patent lawyer, so I don't know when you need to do it, but I do know that it needs to surely be something special at that point. And then as far as copywriting, so copywriting I think is very difficult, right? There's a really amazing TED Talk out there. This attorney, I think she talks about a Balenciaga something or other. And she's like, yeah, you can basically buy any sort of archive items and change 20% of the product. There's a certain threshold of that. And, you know, within that threshold, that's where it no longer becomes like an infringement. So copywriting, I don't know if that's really worth it in fashion, but a patent could be if what you're producing is really interesting. This last question here, how do you convince a retailer to carry your product? You have to create a really great product. You have to build rapport. It should be a win for their customer, meaning it should fit in with their product assortment. The price point should make sense to them. It should be easy, right? Meaning it should be an easy yes. And I think that that is important. You know, if you're like, I'm going to sell to everybody. Well, you know, your product is probably not for everybody. And if you built your brand thinking your brand would be for everybody, you did not build your brand properly, because brands get launched for a specific market and a specific audience, and then they scale from there. Facebook didn't launch to be the global interconnectivity technology provider that they are today, right? They built themselves to be able to connect on a college campus. Very specific need, ended up scaling up on something more global. That's kind of the way you need to think about your product, right? So very specific need on the product, specific customer market positioning, build it niche, let it catch wildfire, right? Like that's an important thing to think about. And I'm gonna put your comment up here, Justin. Thank you. Thanks for thanks for saying that. Okay, so Jennifer, a brand DNA. So that's actually a very long process. Unfortunately, I've only got a couple more minutes. But your brand DNA is essentially your core customer demographics, the key values and attributes, your key positioning, what your visual comms kind of look like. So what's kind of the overall like essence. I think the best word to say this is like, what is the North Star? It's an internal document. Actually, here's the best way I can describe it. If any of you guys out there have ever taken an idea and tried to explain it to 5 people, maybe you explained it to a web developer, a logo developer, maybe we'll say those 2, maybe the third would be like, I don't know, your designer who's creating your product, right? You just tell them the idea. All 3 of those people are going to come back with very different things. Even if you say tell 3 different web developers the same idea, they're going to come back with very different things. The brand DNA allows you to standardize what it is that you are communicating out into the world, into a visually high-touch deck that basically is the North Star of your brand. It allows you to minimize the time for communication in terms of the core essence of your brand. It gives you the foundation and benchmark for your marketing strategy, and it gives you your product direction and focus. It is one of the most critical and fundamental parts of your entire business. All right, last question. What software or app tools do I recommend for inventory tracking and control counts? When to reorder products? All right, Jen, that is a really good question. And it's going to depend on your size of your business. And I have to tell you, I have not found a great, maybe there's someone out here who wants to build this innovation. I have actually not found, I have actually not found a really good business intelligence tool that fits into Shopify. I have only worked with really good business intelligence tools that are more enterprise level. So far, for small businesses who are inventory tracking, like even like the Shopify reports are so awful. And all the company plugins, like the APIs, like none of them actually give you the data. It's like, it's just not, it's like, I would just rather do it on Excel. So I'm actually, unfortunately, if other people have questions on that, like, or they have ideas on that, please share them. Okay, guys, I'm going to take one more question here. What's my position on direct-to-consumer selling? I think you need to do both, guys. Like, honestly, you have to do business in the world. You have to sell online and in store. Preferably, you do both. If you're not doing both, you're missing out on a huge market share. The last 3 months, anyone who's only selling on wholesale really saw a huge dive in their business because everything shifted digitally. So it's like more like brick and mortar. Also, a lot of products went on sale if you were selling wholesale to retailers. You'll also find that before this pandemic, if you only sold online and you did not have an experiential presence, you also really missed out on the Gen Z consumer and on the younger millennial consumer, who's heavily driven by experiential touch and feeling products and closing the gap on authenticity, quality, and connection. So it is, it's very, I would say very important to kind of think about, when it comes to revenue streams, like all revenue streams. I would never discount any revenue streams. The question for you is actually, when's the time period that you're going to be launching those revenue streams? And will you have the capital to effectively launch that revenue stream at that time, right? The challenging thing is that sometimes we're like, yeah, I'm going to sell online and I'm going to, I'm going to sell online, and then I'm also going to sell, in stores, but I'm not going to realize that like actually the cost of like those on the P&L and like those line items are going to be different. We did get someone who has some ideas here on inventory tracking. I have to say, I'm going to post them. I actually don't like these ones, but I'm going to post it anyways. WooCommerce, Zero API and inventory, QuickBooks inventory APIs. Go ahead and give those a shot. I personally haven't really liked them that much, and haven't really found one that kind of does what I want to do. But thank you for showing those recommendations. You guys give them a shot, and otherwise I'd say nothing beats good old Microsoft Excel. It's definitely one of my favorites. All right, guys. So I am going to wrap up here. I'm again thrilled to get a chance to speak to all of you. I know all of us are struggling professionally, trying to get things off the ground. Certainly today you're looking at launching your product, your brand, lots of different components there. Ultimately, the thing that will certainly set your business apart from the rest will be your ability to get very clear and focused on your own value propositions, what you're creating, and actually being able to, it's actually being able to move forward with a clear direction. We get into these issues where we are charging forward because we think we have to move forward as fast as possible. When actually, if you go a lot slower and you actually really build the foundation, you increase your opportunity for success. And if you don't build the foundation properly, you won't actually know why you failed, and you actually won't know why you were successful and how to replicate that. So the more information you have on this process, the more that you realize that being a first-time business owner more than often means you'll be a second-time business owner and maybe a third-time business owner. Should give you some perspective on the fact that, being an entrepreneur is less of a glamorized problem and honestly more of a curse, right? So be careful of the journey that you guys get down that path for. All right, guys, thank you so much. Please stay safe. Heart goes out to all of you, to your loved ones. We're in a time of suffering, and I appreciate you taking time out of everything that's going on in the world to look at this business and look at your business and focus on something that's going to help your companies move forward.